We're on the second verse in our series called Sohila, Finding Your Way Home. We've been understanding the verses through a story where a young bride is about to be married and seeking advice from her elders. In the same way, we've learnt that creating a spiritual union within our minds and hearts requires guidance from those who've lived by the highest wisdom. In our story, the bride now gets further clarification from her elders to make sure that she's on the right path. So welcome to the second verse of Sohila, Finding Your Way Home. If you know anything about Indian weddings, the tradition is that the groom and the family always come to the bride's village. It's a big festivity, and there's even a name for that whole procession of the groom coming with all of his family and friends. It's called the Barat. So traditionally, the bride is getting herself ready for the groom to come and take her away. In our story, the bride is being told, you need to go and look for the groom. You need to go and find your husband. And what this indicates is that when we get inspired on our spiritual journey, there's work to be done. It isn't something that's cheap that we can just get for free. There's effort to be put in. So in this story, she asks the elders, I've never seen this person. How do I know what he'll look like? We talked about before how in traditional Indian weddings going back 50 or 100 years, the bride and groom would only meet on the wedding day itself. So she's excited to meet her husband, but she wants clarification. So we're looking at the next verse of Sohila through this lens of her trying to get more clarification. And again, in our own spiritual quest, we may be inspired, but the reality is we've never seen something like this before. We've never experienced life through this oneness. We don't really know what we're looking for. We might understand some concepts, and we might even think, well, I know what the world looks like, but what does this divine look like? What does this oneness look like? It seems invisible to me. So that's the question, and verse 2 is their reply. It begins Rag Asa, which is the musical note, Mahalla Pehla, the Guru's first mansion, written by Guru Nanak. And they reply, there are 6 schools with 6 teachers and 6 philosophies. Yet there is only one Guru of all the teachers who appears in many forms. O mankind, whatever home is praising the divine creator, preserve that home, as this will be great for you. Reflect. Seconds, minutes, and hours turn into nights, days, and months. But only one sun remains throughout the many seasons. Similarly, O Nanak, the one creator has many forms. Chhe kar, chhe gur, chhe upades. Gur gur eko, ves anek. Baba, jai kar karte kirat hoye, so kar rakh vadai toye. Rahao. Viswe chasya kadiya pehra, thiti vari ma hoa, suraj eko, rut anek. Nanak karte ke kete ves. For those of you who've come across the Japji Sahib series, or even if you're familiar with the verses in the Japji Sahib, you'll know that towards the end, after Guru Nanak has described oneness, the universe, universal flow in so many different ways, Guru Nanak summarizes the spiritual path in 4 spiritual stages called the khands. Now, those of you who know my take on that and have followed my series, you might be thinking there's a fifth khand as well, but if you've followed my series, you'll know that there's actually only 4. The 5th one is beyond your ability to obtain it. It is just the ultimate source. But there are 4 stages for you to go through. Very interestingly, when we look at other verses in Guru Granth Sahib, we can begin to see the same pattern emerge, the same 4 stages. And so we're also, as well as looking at the Sohila verses through this lens of this story of the bride going to find her groom, we're also going to see if it matches with Guru Nanak's 4 stages that he mentions elsewhere in the Japji Sahib. And the first stage, for those of you who are familiar with that, is called Dharam Khand. You can think of it as 4 levels to your spiritual growth. And the first level is called Dharam Khand, the right way to live. The first level is getting the right priorities in your life. Deciding that spiritual wisdom is something that you're going to put into your life. That's the first level. When you begin to reprioritize and start to walk the spiritual path. Interestingly, Sohila verse 1 and 2 that we're covering today is actually a description of that initial stage of trying to find out, what is this journey? Am I interested? How do I go on this path? It's finding out that information. So we're seeing that Sohila, covered over the next couple of verses, will also be looking at the same 4 stages and describing them in different ways. So what are we seeing in this one? What we're seeing is the bride has a sense of willingness. I'm interested. I want to know more. Give me more information. But she asks a very important question. What am I looking for? Now that I've heard about it, how do I go on this journey? And in our spiritual journey, this is the most significant question. How do we see this oneness and how do we know it? How do we make sure that we're not being deluded by something else? If you think about religion in general, far too many people rely on belief. They simply just believe in an imaginary figure, which they call God or whatever name they want to give it. And for them, God is just a friend, an imaginary friend in the sky who answers prayers, gives you what you wish for, and hopefully you get to meet this God when you die. That's all they're relying on. And what happens is you can only believe that for so long. And for a lot of people, and this is the world that we're seeing right now, people just wake up after a while and they realize this is just a lie that they've told themselves, or something that they've been sold by the religious classes. They've never actually seen it, and they decide one day, I just don't believe it anymore. And so this is why people say that they've lost faith, because they had faith to begin with in the first place. It was just a belief. What's very interesting is if you look up the definition of the word belief, it means to put your faith in something that you don't know to be true. That's what belief means. And you have to ask yourself, do I know this as a truth? Do the masters that I'm learning from know this as a truth? And when we listen to the spiritual masters, the verses of someone like Guru Nanak, he's not talking about something that he believes. He knows. He's seen it. Even when we look in the Bible, the words of Christ, he's saying, I have seen it. Come to me. I will show you the way. I know where I'm going. I know how to get there. So the spiritual masters don't rely on belief. And too many religions rely on belief these days. And real spirituality has no room for belief. You either know it or you don't. Or if you don't know it, you're on a quest to actually know, to actually see it without any doubt. And there are so many things in life that we know. You don't believe that the sun exists or the moon exists. You know. It's an obvious truth, right? That's that level of knowing. So you know the sun exists. You know the moon exists because you've seen it. There's nobody, if somebody tried to convince you that it didn't exist, you say, well, I can see it right there. What am I looking at? That's the level of clarity that these spiritual masters have about this divine oneness. It's not just something that they believe in. And in order to give the bride that level of clarity, they give 2 examples of how, let us show you how to see it. The first example they say, Che kar, che gur, che updes, gur gur eko, ves anek. There are 6 schools with 6 teachers and 6 philosophies. Yet there is only one guru of all the teachers, who appears in many forms. And so the first example is just like all across the country and all across the world, there are so many schools teaching children and so many different teachers, yet they're still teaching the same few subjects. So if you just take science, mathematics, English, There may be so many different ways to teach this subject, but behind it all, there is only one subject. There may be so many teachers doing it in many different languages, in many different schools. But there is still only one thing behind it all, one same subject. So it's starting to get our brain to think about, let's not focus on all the variety, what's the commonality behind it? So the first example they give is just like there are 6 schools, and the 6 schools that they're talking about here at the time were 6 ancient schools of philosophy, of ancient spiritual philosophy. What's interesting is this becomes quite difficult to translate into English, because a school of thought would imply that there are very distinct schools of thought. The word in the old ancient language is these are called 6 darshanas. And the word darshan means perspective. 6 different perspectives on one same thing. So they're not really different schools of thought. They're different approaches to look at the same subject. So here the Guru says that just as there are many different schools looking at trying to identify oneness and the divine, what is the one thing that's common between all of them? They're all trying to explain the one subject. You focus on that. Don't get lost in the differences. And it might actually be interesting to just have a quick look at what are these 6 ancient schools of philosophy. I know when I hear about something like this, I'm curious. I'm saying, oh, what do they all say? What are the differences? So in no particular order, I'll just go through the 6 and just very quickly explain what these 6 schools are. So the first one is called Sankhya philosophy. And it's by a teacher called Rishi Kapil. And in Sankhya philosophy, what they did was spirituality or spirit is completely different to the physical world. That's how they looked at it. They said there is a physical world and then there is a spiritual world, and they're not linked in any way. So that's, again, I'm giving it a gross generalization. Each one of these schools is immensely complex and has many books and many teachers and many things. So it's very difficult to give a one-line summary of what this is. But Sankhya philosophy is that the physical realm and the spiritual realm are distinct. The next one is called Nyaya, and the teacher is known as either Gautama or Akshapada. So again, not Gautama Buddha from the Buddhist philosophy, and I'll explain why that's different. This is called Nyaya. And in this school of philosophy, you should be able to understand the divine purely through logic and reason. If it's reasonable, so they would say something like, if there is a creation, then the creator is logical. So that's how they try to understand the entire world and spirituality around it. The next school of philosophy, which a lot of people will be familiar with, is called yoga, or yoga in modern day English. And the main teacher is accredited as being Patanjali. Now in yoga, they don't really care about trying to define the universe. They're more interested in, well, how do we connect with it? We can't explain what it is, but how do we connect with it? And they use a lot of physical practices and meditation to still the mind and connect with that divine being. The 4th school is called Vaisheshika, and the teacher of that school is called Kanad. And their whole way of looking at the universe was reductionism, to look at everything that can be broken down into the smallest. So they were really studiers of nature, trying to look at what is the smallest thing that we can understand, right down to the atomic level. And if we can look at all of those things, we get a big picture of what the divine is like by studying the minute details. Then there is the 5th school, which is called Purva Mimamsa. And the teacher of that is called Rishi Jaimini. And this is the one that looks at the oldest Indian scriptures called the Vedas. And the oldest Indian scriptures wasn't really trying to define the divine at all. It was simply saying, in order to connect, a bit like yoga, in order to connect, you must do a certain set of duties. There are certain rituals, fire rituals, certain practices, certain times of day and seasons. Just follow all of these traditions. So you do your spiritual duties, and at the same time, you also do your worldly duties. As long as you do all those, you're going to be spiritually connected. But we're not going to try and define what that is. And the final one, again, is a very popular one that people will know, which is, if the last one was called Purva Mimamsa, this is called Uttar Mimamsa, and that's more commonly known as Vedanta. And again, Vedanta is an extremely complicated subject because it has many different sub-schools, as do almost all of these schools. They have their own teachers and they have sub-teachers and sub-teachers, and they have their own ways of looking at it. But the Vedanta created newer texts after the old Veds. So Vedanta means the end of the Vedas, the final chapters of those. So they started to create new ones, and that's where they really begin to try and describe what is divine, what is the relationship with divine and the physical world, how do we connect with it. And there are many different methods within that, and there'll be so many different ways of understanding that. So again, none of these are very simple to define, but again, within Vedanta, they were looking at creating new texts like the Upanishads, which were trying to give more clarity, more techniques to understand the connection between the self and the divine. And so these are the 6 schools of ancient Indian philosophies. And when we talk about the 6 schools, they're actually called the Astic traditions or the theistic traditions. These are the traditions that all in some way or the other are focused around the authority of the Vedas, the oldest spiritual texts. They're all looking at the Vedas in some way and analyzing it and trying to get more information out of it. So these are called Astic traditions. They hold the Vedas as the central authority. Now you also get other schools like Buddhism, which are called Gnostic traditions. Now today the word Gnostic in common Indian language means atheist, but the original meaning is you either believed in the Veds or you were doing a spiritual school which is outside of the Veds. So things like Buddhism, Jainism, I believe even Tantra, all of these things do not use the Veds to try and define and understand the self and the universe. So Buddhism would be seen as a Gnostic tradition, not because they're non-believers or they're atheist, because they don't hold the Vedas as a central authority. They don't care about the Vedas. They're not trying to get their definitions from the Vedas. And what's very interesting when you look at these 6 schools, like I mentioned, there are 6 darshanas. There's 6 perspectives on the divine. There's a lot of overlap when you study them. They're not very distinct schools. I mean, if you think about kind of Venn diagrams that you would draw in schools, it would be, a lot of circles where there's overlapping bits. So these schools have many areas where they agree and many areas which are ever so slightly different. So there's a lot of crossover. Now, those of you who come from the Sikh tradition will be asking this question, well, where does Guru Nanak's philosophy fit into this? Which one is it? Is it Astic? Is it Gnostic? Does it fall under one of these? And sometimes when you go on online forums, people are trying to define which type of Vedanta is Guru Nanak's philosophy. What's very interesting is as we go through this particular verse, we'll be able to get a very clear answer from this. And Guru Nanak will answer the question in this simple way: you've fallen into the trap. You've fallen into the trap of trying to look at the minute details and not looking at that which is higher. Guru Nanak, just like the elders are advising the bride, how do I see oneness? Guru Nanak is always saying, you see oneness by looking behind the curtain, looking behind what is apparently real and seeing what is behind all that. So don't look to create more divisions. Don't say, well, the Sikhs are over there and the Muslims are over there and the Hindus are over there and this is our very clear philosophy. This is actually what our religion says and your religion says that. That's not what Guru Nanak is teaching, and it's clear in this. He says, just like there are all of these different schools, Gur Gur Eko, Ves Anek. Behind it all, there is only one Guru, which appears in many different forms. So what is this one Guru? Is he talking about himself? He says, I am the one Guru. Is that what he's talking about? Guru Nanak is basically pointing out that all of these superficial differences that you see are actually just facades. There's something behind it. All of them are pointing to one higher wisdom, and higher wisdom comes from one source because it all points to the same direction. So there is one ultimate source where all higher knowledge is coming from. I don't know if you remember hearing stories when you were in school about 6 blind men all holding different parts of the elephant. And they're saying, well, I think the elephant is very strong and hard because he's holding onto the tusk. And they say, well, no, that's not true at all. He's very wide because he's holding onto the leg. Another blind man's holding onto the leg. Another one's holding onto the tail and say, no, it's not very wide at all. It's very thin. That's what an elephant is like. And the other one's holding onto the big floppy ears and saying, no, it's very floppy. It's not rigid at all. So different people all looking at the same elephant, holding it, touching it, feeling it, but they've only got a limited perspective. Guru Nanak is trying to get you out of that limited perspective. Don't look at life in this particular way. So he's saying that there is one thing that he's calling the Guru. And he's not calling himself the Guru. He's saying there is this one thing, the highest wisdom, the highest ability to transform you from darkness to light, that all comes from one place. So don't get lost in these distinctions. If you're enjoying watching this video, then we need your support to keep this amazing resource going. Nanak Naam is here to make spiritual wisdom available for everyone. We present the teachings of oneness in a way that's easy to understand and apply to our daily lives. So far, our videos and podcasts have reached people in 170 countries, from Croatia to Nigeria, from Brazil to Japan. And by donating towards the costs of creating these videos, you can help us continue to produce more learning materials that will change people's lives around the globe. Our future videos include more explanations of Gurbani, such as the Lama and Salok Melanoma, as well as our courses on relationships, anger management, addictions, and so many more important subjects. So donate today and join us in our mission to share Guru Nanak's wisdom of oneness around the world. Visit nanaknaam.org and click donate. So Guru Nanak is making it very clear here that no one person alone can be called the Guru. And many times in Guru Nanak's own words, we say Guru Nanak is the first Guru, but so many times in his own words, he says, I bow down to the Guru. So who's he bowing down to? He's bowing down to that higher wisdom. Yeah, I bow down to this. And we heard in the first verse of Sohila, I bow down to this song that gives me forever peace. So Guru Nanak is not trying to establish himself as the only authority. And some traditions do this. Our prophet is the only prophet, the last final prophet. Islam very boldly says there is no other prophet after that. There is no other messenger of God. People who follow Christ say Christ is the only way. Guru Nanak never makes that kind of claim that it's me or nothing. He's saying all of this is a limited way of looking at it. There's always a Guru that's existed, whether even the planets and the stars exist. There's always a Guru, this higher wisdom. And again, depending on which things you study, you can look at old Greek models, different philosophies, and what they talk about is archetypes. They give a very simple example that there are many different types of apple, but yet they all have one similar characteristic called apple. How do you know an apple isn't an orange? You might be looking at 10 or 20 or 100 different types of apples, yet they all have something that binds them all together. That's called the archetype, that there is one appleness about them. You can have very big oranges and very small oranges, yet you all know that it's a type of orange. They have these similar characteristics. So in the same way, Guru Nanak is saying that even though there's many different types of schools, there is something above all of them, which is the archetype of wisdom itself, which is the Guru. So some way to think about it in that way. And the Guru is saying there's always one Guru, Ves Anek, with many different costumes. Don't get lost in the costumes. So this is the first advice as the young bride is asking the question, how do I know what it looks like? The first piece of advice is step above these distinctions. Don't get lost in these distinctions. Can you move past them? Can you see the uniformity behind it all? Can you break all dualities? Breaking duality is Guru Nanak's direct path. He's saying that's all you have to do. Recognize oneness behind it all, and you'll begin to break away the shackles of your old ways of thinking. Guru Nanak is always talking about breaking dualities. And, again, what's very important, let's look at how the various gurus within the Sikh tradition confirmed that they were always talking about the same thing. Let's go back to this term that we've seen a couple of times, Mahalla Pehla. The verses never say this is written by the first Guru. They never say it's written by the second Guru. When we explain it in English, we actually say it like that. This verse is written by the second Guru. Guru Nanak doesn't even use that. He says there is one Guru in many houses. This verse is written by the Guru in its first house, and then we'll see other verses written by the Guru in the second house, which means that the wisdom has gone from one to another. Guru Nanak may look different to his successor, but don't look at the differences, look at that which is behind it. Mahalla pehla, mahalla duja, mahalla tija. So there's very clear, consistent philosophy throughout all of them. Right up to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, people don't seem to understand the difference between a very peaceful looking Guru like Guru Nanak and very fierce looking Guru like Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who was a warrior, who had weapons, who had swords, who had to fight battles to defend against human rights discriminations that were going on at the time. But they confirm we are not different. We are the same light in many different bodies. Speaking of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, there's a beautiful verse in one of his writings called the Akal Ustak. And this is where you begin to see how beautifully he describes oneness. He says, Kathu suchet hoike chetana ko char kiyo, kathu achint hoike sovat achet ho. He says, somewhere you are awakened consciousness, and somewhere you are asleep carefree. Somewhere you are the beggar who is begging, and somewhere you are the giver who is giving. Somewhere you're giving a king wealth, and somewhere you're taking it all away. He's singing to the divine and saying, I see you in all these different ways. Somewhere you're acting out Hindu Vedic rituals, and somewhere you're protesting against them. You're acting against them. Somewhere you are beyond physical matter, and somewhere you're infused into it all. Remember how we talked about these different schools of philosophy? And some were saying physical matter and the world and the spiritual world are two different things. And that's our stance on it. And other schools will say, no, they're all part of the same thing. Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, I don't take a view on this. I'm not going to bring myself down to that level of debating and arguing. Is God like this or is God like that? He says, somewhere God is like this and somewhere God is like that. Somewhere God believes this and somewhere the divine believes that. Somewhere you act out Hindu rituals and somewhere you're protesting against the Hindu rituals. Look how he's able to see oneness. He's able to take a step back. So this is in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's writings, which we see him as a warrior only, but he's an amazing spiritual philosopher as well because he understood it. He's a master. He's gained that understanding. So Guru Nanak's ultimate philosophy, the direct path, oneness. Oneness is everything. Oneness is everywhere. And that's the advice that's being given to the young bride. And the reason it's such a clear piece of advice is because spiritual masters know this is not how we live. We're just unable to live in this particular way. We don't even think that much about oneness. We spend most of our lives thinking about ourselves. Everything that we look at, we don't see oneness. We look at how does it serve me? Is this going to be good for me? Is this going to be bad for me? Is this my friend or is this my enemy? So everything is about us. When we see the universe, we make it about us. When the masters see the universe, they make it about the universe. They make it about the oneness that's behind it all. So the masters know that we have a very limited way of looking at life. We've limited ourselves. We've hidden this truth from ourselves. This is a delusion that we create. And the masters are saying, let's point out all of your divisions. Let's point out which spiritual school do you belong to? That might be one of the first questions that somebody goes up to a master and says, which is the right path? And the masters are saying, what are you talking about paths? Today, if you wanted to go down a religious route, you might say, I used to be a Buddhist, but now I'm a Christian. I used to be a Christian, but now I'm a Jain. I used to be a yogi, but now I'm a Sufi. I've heard and I had conversations with people about this way of, I used to do this, but now I do that. Then you haven't understood. You haven't begun. If you're starting to just hop around from one another, and again, it's not to say that you don't take the wisdom from these various places, but if that wisdom doesn't really go deep within you, you haven't really begun what that wisdom is trying to do to you. You haven't started that process. Look at all the different ways that we create divisions. I belong to this religion. This is who I am. I belong to this nationality or race. I'm American, I'm British, I'm Indian, I'm white, I'm black, I'm Chinese. Why do we create these divisions? I'm male, I'm female. Today there's so many conversations around gender pronouns and people are trying to create even further and further distinctions. I'm definitely not this, I'm definitely not that. Don't call me by this name, call me by that name. So we're creating further divisions. And the Guru is saying, no, you're not. This is just a body. This is just a vessel. I like to think about a flute. What is the flute? Is it the reed? Or is it the music that's coming out of it? The Guru is saying, you're not this body. The same music can be played on many different flutes. That's not who you are. Be the music. Be the song. That's what Sohila is all about. Be the song that's going on inside you rather than the actual vessel itself. Don't limit yourself, because the more that you limit yourself, you're going to delude yourself further and further. You're going to take yourself further and further away from this divine husband. This is not the way to recognize the divine. This is the way to create limitations. Behind it all, there's a oneness that's making all of this happen. And so if you find any school that teaches you this ultimate truth of oneness, go there, study that. And this is the rahau, the chorus of this, the summary of this particular verse. Baba jai kar karte kirat hoye, so kar rakh vadaye toye. O mankind, whatever home is praising the divine creator, preserve that home, as this will be good for you. Go there, stay there. So the obvious question is, what is that home? Where do I go? Where do I find this? What is the Guru's house? It's wherever this wisdom resides. The Guru is not making a distinction saying, only go to my temple, only go to the Sikh temple. You must become part of the Sikh religion. All other religions are false. It's just not doing that, because it's coming from this very high place. It's saying, I'm not interested in your religion. I'm not interested in what prayers you do or what robes you wear. I'm interested in, do you have that higher mindset? Are you able to use religion as a tool to take you out of distinctions, out of dualities? So it's wherever this wisdom is truly being explained, it's truly being thought about, where the divine, the ultimate oneness is really being taught, and never distinction, segregation, separation. When those things are being taught, then you're in the wrong place. Something very interesting for us to think about. What is my school? What am I doing? What am I learning from? Am I really going to the right place? Because the Guru Nanak's wisdom is saying, wherever people gather to connect and praise with this divine oneness, go there. And that's the rahau line. Reflect on this. Think about this, young bride. Make sure you're going to the right place. Don't go into the wrong place. So we have to ask ourselves, have we found true religion? Are we there yet? It starts to become difficult now, because religion has become synonymous with creating a segregation, creating a club, a group. Are you just part of a group? Are you lost? Are you just part of a club? Or are you just moving away from that? Are you able to lift yourself up from there? There's a beautiful teaching by Guru Nanak Dev Ji where he specifically references these 6 schools, and he explains how do you understand them. He says, Dikhya daru pojan khaye, che darshan ki soji paye. Whoever eats these teachings, the teachings of the Guru, these higher teachings, whoever eats these teachings of the Guru as their medicine and food, they gain the understanding of all the 6 spiritual schools. It doesn't matter which spiritual school you go to. If you understand this higher wisdom, you've understood the spiritual school. You've done what the spiritual school was trying to get you to. So he makes it very clear, the highest wisdom is what you're seeking. There is no room for discrimination, segregation, superiority, hierarchy, anything like that is where you're going down the wrong path. So kare rakh vadaye toy. Preserve this wisdom. Go and cherish this wisdom. Go and look after it. Make sure you're part of this. This is the only thing that'll be good for you. Remember, it's about the elders giving the bride all of the advice that they can before she leaves. And so when you're off on your way, this is what you need to look out for. Stay in that home if you find this home of true wisdom. Now, someone may ask, well, if there is only one Guru, why are there so many different schools? What's the point of all of these different schools? And this is where the next line begins to explain that. So she asks the elders, why is there so much confusion? Why isn't it simple? And so the elders reply, Viswe chasya kadiya pehra tittivari maho hoa, suraj eko rut anek. Just like seconds turn to minutes, like minutes turn into hours, hours turn into nights and days and months. Behind all of this, there's only one sun, even though there are many different seasons. Throughout all the different seasons, there's one sun. Again, look at the similarity. Look at something that's common behind all of it. One constant sun, no matter whether you're looking at a single moment in time or long seasons. No matter when the one sun is giving you lots of heat or it feels like there's no heat at all. Think about how one sun can create so many different seasons. Our relationship with the sun, the Earth's relationship with the sun defines it, but the sun doesn't move. The sun is just what it is. It's us moving nearer and closer and further away from it. Sometimes think how different summer feels to winter. Think how different night feels to day. And we can look at all these differences and we can say, what's happening to the sun? Today the sun is being good to me. Tomorrow the sun is not being good to me. That's the kind of mentality we have. But the reality is there's one sun. It's us that's making these distinctions. So one sun can create many different experiences and they can all feel very different, but understand, recognize that there is only one sun. And in the same way, in life, there are going to be so many different seasons. There are so many times when life will feel different, when you'll feel good or when you'll feel bad. Young turns into old. Health turns into weakness. There are so many times when life feels different and we can get lost in these things. We can resist these things. I don't want to grow old. Old is different to young. Remember how the word fear was talked about in the previous verse. Fear is about holding on to things and not wanting anything to change. Change is looking at the small detail, looking behind it all. It's all life. It's all one thing. It's just you not being able to look at it in the same way. Sometimes you'll have loved ones all around you, people who respect you, honor you, and there'll be other times where nobody wants to know your name and you've lost all your honor. There'll be times when you'll be really successful with all the great resources that you need at your fingertips, all the money. And then there'll be other times where you'll feel like a failure. People will look at you and say, you've lost everything. You need to start all over again. The big question now becomes, what do you identify yourself with? If you identify with your looks, you're going to be in turmoil when your looks begin to fade. If you identify with your family, I belong to this family, I'm part of this. What's going to happen when they leave? What's going to happen when things and circumstances change? You won't know who you are because you've identified that I am this. You've limited your identity. If you identify with your job or your business, what happens when the markets change and circumstances change in that way? If you identify with your religion, what happens when the philosophies don't align with you anymore? When you don't believe them anymore? When those ideas are no longer making sense to you? So identifying with one thing and trying to hold on to that and making that static is what causes conflict, causes turmoil within us. Identifying with the ever-changing nature of life is a far more healthier thing to identify with. I am nothing but a flow of life that's just changing from one form to another. One day I'm young, one day I'm old. One day I'm healthy, another day I'm weak. That is who I am. That is the identity that you really are. Don't limit yourself to just one thing because everything changes. And we don't know how to deal with that. And sometimes we just change for change's sake. We identify with one thing and that didn't quite work for us anymore, and then we go and get a whole new wardrobe. We try and reinvent ourselves and give ourselves a new identity. But this isn't a new identity. This is another false identity. This isn't the truth. The truth is you're none of these things. These are just ways that we've created separations with ourselves. And your separateness is a lie. You're not separate. You're not separate from life. You're not separate from the universe. You might want to create a sense of uniqueness about you. Fine, go ahead. Stand out from the crowd. But don't believe in that. That's just a temporary shell. There's something far more beautiful inside. And what you really are is life playing out this song. You are the oneness of life. That's who you really are. Without holding on to some sort of identity there. Oh, God is me. I am God. Don't hold on to that because you're not going to be around for long. Don't hold on to another delusion. Life is life. Life is acting out. This is the song of life. And what this begins to do is this begins to create a realization with us, which is you're nothing special. There's nothing interesting about you. There's nothing so fascinating about you that you've got to hold on to. And life is telling you that eventually you're just going to turn back into dust. That's what you really are. You're just eventually going to turn into the soil that you came from. That's what you're going to turn into. And once the Guru starts to keep pointing this wisdom out to you again and again, you start to now realize, oh, what have I been believing in? That there's something so important, I got to make sure I look like this, or I got to make sure That's fine, you can do all those things, but it's that belief within you that creates that problem. The universe is always going to be in this flow of creation and destruction, and that's going to be happening to you as well. So don't worship this body, this family, this life, this health. Don't marry that, because you're not going to be able to hold on to it. This is a short-term relationship that you have with all of these things. This is not a true marriage. So life is flowing. Now again, when we talk about this, we always have to talk about the practicalities of it. Well, what about my family responsibilities? Should I not go to work? Should I not feed my kids? Well, of course you should. Do all those things. Do your worldly duties. Some of the spiritual schools, the ancient spiritual schools are saying, make sure you do your worldly duties. Don't ignore your worldly responsibilities in pursuit of the spiritual responsibilities. And Guru Nanak's philosophy around that dharam khand that we talked about is that perfect balance between the two. Because in order to say, I'm going to leave the world, I'm just going to go sit in a cave and meditate, that's also creating a separateness. You're creating a separateness that says, I reject one thing and I only accept another thing. Guru's saying, do it all. Do it while you're here. Go to work and meditate at the same time. Feed your kids. Have loving family relationships. Enjoy your life, but don't get stuck with it. Don't have this false belief with it. So the way I like to think about it is you've got to play the game, but you've got to remain detached. Sometimes I play board games with my kids and they get so involved in the game and they get so emotional when things are happening. Like, I've just won a piece, I've lost a piece. And what's the adult doing? The adult is saying, it's just a game. I can enjoy it, I can play it, I can get into it, but I'm not emotionally hurt when something happens. And you only have to have played a game with a child who's lost and they're completely distraught. Why? Did you believe that this was real? Did you believe that this was actually happening to you? No. We know how to play a game and remain detached from it. The gurus are saying the same thing. Play life in that way, like you're playing a game. They're just a master at a higher level than we are. Just like when we're playing with children, the children don't get it. No matter how much you explain to the kids, they don't get it. They don't have that level of mental maturity to just say, oh, it's okay, it's not a problem. We don't have that level of mental maturity to play the game of life the way the masters are playing it, that says, you're going to lose all these pieces anyway. It's okay. So play the game in that way, knowing that you're going to lose all these pieces. That's how the masters are playing the game of life. They're not rejecting the game. They're not saying, nope, I'm not going to play. They're saying, play it in a smart way. So we know how to do this already. We've just got to understand that we've got to up our game. We've got to take it to a higher level. Because we are this oneness. When you have something else, then you can play the game and enjoy it for what it is, but you know that it's trivial when you have something else that you can connect to. The children, what do they have? Think about a game of Monopoly. You have a home, you have money, you have a bank account, you have bills to pay, you've got income coming in. The children have none of those things. So when they play a game like Monopoly, they're like, no, this is my house. You have to pay me rent. This is my money. This is my bank account, because they don't have any of those things in real life. So when we have something else, we can see how frivolous a game really is. The spiritual masters have something even more, and they can see how frivolous life really is, how temporary life really is, because they have something higher to connect to. You need to connect with that, your true essence. If you know the Mool Mantar, the first phrase is Ik Onkar, oneness unfolding infinitely. The next phrase is Satnam. This is your true identity. This is the truth. This is your true name, or this truth is the name. There is an ultimate truth. None of the other things are true. No other identity is true. What is your true identity? What is your Satnam? Your ultimate connection. your eternal name, and it has to be oneness. It has to be Ik Onkar. So while there are many different schools of thought, they're all pointing to the same goal. They're all trying to reach that same divine. So think about it as 6 paths and 1 direction. And above all, Guru Nanak's wisdom again and again is focus on the oneness. Focus on that. This Guru, that is this one master, one sustainer, one destroyer, one creator, is infused into everything. There's one life force manifesting in many different forms. So the question is, can you connect with it? Can you see it? Can you be a part of it? Can you know it? Can you look beyond the differences and see what is constant? No matter how life changes, no matter what circumstances happen to you, can you connect with that? Or are you just going to allow your emotions to change as your circumstances change? When you receive something, life feels good. When something gets taken away, life feels terrible. When you created an expectation that life was going to go this way and it went a different way, then your emotions are all over the place. We're always changing like the different seasons. As spring turns to summer, summer turns to autumn, autumn turns to winter, our emotions are always changing like the seasons. But can we focus on the one sun, on the one constant behind all the seasons? So no matter what happens in life, we can hold on to this oneness. And this oneness is not conceptual. It's not just an idea. If you wanted to look at just the physical world right now, there are so many different things. And what's consistent amongst all of these things is that all of this isn't nothing. This is how I've begun to understand it. There is a somethingness to this moment. Right now, all of these variation, all of this creation, day, night, male, female, all these things, is all part of a somethingness. Is there something here? Yes, there is something here. Is there something over there? It's all part of the same somethingness. The isness of this moment is how you begin to see behind it, how you start to look at it. So as we start to wrap up the second verse, let's reflect on the first verse. Began by pointing out that there is a home that you need to go to. The first verse opened with Jai kar kirat akhiye, karte ka hoy bicharo. If there is a home where divine praises are being sung and the divine is being understood. In this verse, we've gotten more clarity. What is that home? That home is where oneness is being taught. Again and again and again, different examples coming through. What is that home? What is that place wherever oneness is being taught? So as a bride, you're instructed to recognize oneness. That's how you will be able to see the divine husband. Go and seek that out. Go and find that. The interesting question is now, where do you go? Where do you go to look for that? Look for the consistency in all moments. Look for the sameness. Don't go to a particular place. Don't try and gain a new experience. Don't try and go to a different event. Don't think that it's something in the future or something in the past that's missed you by. It's always here. Oneness has to be consistent. It's always here. It's the somethingness of this moment. It's the isness of life itself. And when you begin to see it, it's really obvious. It's here right now. It's speaking right now. It's listening right now. There's an obviousness to it all, just like the obvious answer, is life here right now? Yes, of course it is. Is the universe here in this very moment? Yes, it is. Is it inside you? Yes. Is it all around you? Yes. So it's really obvious when you've just been shown how to look at it. When you've been able to look behind the curtain, you realize it's here all the time. And that is what you need to connect with. And when you see it, it's beautiful and it's radiating all around you. Answer these questions either by writing them down or discussing them in your groups. Like one flame on many candles, can you think of other examples of seeing one in the many? What practices can you do to cultivate a sense of oneness? How does seeing oneness in all impact how you interact with others and deal with conflict? Are there times in life when making distinctions can be useful? I'm honored to have this opportunity to present this course to you. You can download this course for free today by visiting our website, livingwithwisdom.org.